Since 2013, China has committed an estimated $1 trillion to infrastructure projects across more than 150 countries. Roads, railways, pipelines, and, most relevant to this channel, ports. Look at a map of where those port investments are concentrated, and you'll notice something. They sit at almost every major maritime choke point on Earth. The Strait of Malacca, the entrance to the Red Sea, the mouth of the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean, the entrance to the Baltic. This is not a coincidence. This is a strategy. And understanding it is essential to understanding the future of global logistics. I'm the host of Supply Chain Daily. I cover the systems of global trade from inside the industry. The Belt and Road Initiative is one of those topics where you can generate a lot of heat very quickly. It's contested politically, it's covered with varying degrees of accuracy, and the reality is more complex than most commentary suggests. Today, I want to explain what BRI actually is in logistics terms, what has been built, what the commercial reality looks like, and what the supply chain industry is watching. Not a geopolitical polemic, an operational assessment. Let's dive straight into it. Global trade infrastructure, ports, rail links, road connections, is not neutral. The choice of who builds it, who operates it, who finances it, and under what terms shapes the commercial relationships of the countries it connects for decades. Infrastructure creates dependency. It creates preferential routing. And it creates the conditions under which one country's carriers and logistics firms have structural advantages over others. For most of the post-World War II period, the dominant logistics infrastructure, the ports, the shipping lines, the financial systems, was built around the Western trading system. Rotterdam, Los Angeles, Felixstowe, Maersk, MSC, CMA, CGM, Lloyds, Swift. China's Belt and Road Initiative is, at its core, an attempt to build a parallel infrastructure system, one in which Chinese carriers, Chinese ports, and Chinese financial arrangements have structural advantages. For the global supply chain industry, this matters not as an ideological question, but as an operational one. When a new port opens that is Chinese-built, Chinese-financed, and Chinese-operated, it changes the routing options available to every shipper who needs to move cargo through that region. Sometimes that creates genuine efficiencies. Sometimes it creates new dependencies. Almost always, it shifts bargaining power. Xi Jinping announced what was initially called the Silk Road Economic Belt and the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road in 2013. The land component, running through Central Asia to Europe, drew on the historical Silk Road trade routes that had connected China to the Mediterranean world for millennia. The maritime component traced the sea routes used by Chinese Admiral Zheng He in the 15th century and later by European colonial trading companies. The initiative was not invented from nothing. It built on a Chinese going-out strategy that had been developing since the early 2000s, a recognition that China's economic growth required secure access to raw materials and markets, and that dependence on infrastructure controlled by others was a strategic vulnerability. The Malacca Dilemma, the recognition that most of China's oil imports pass through a strait it doesn't control, was explicitly part of the strategic thinking. The scale of BRI ambition was and remains extraordinary. The World Bank has estimated that if completed as envisaged, BRI could reduce trade costs significantly for participating countries and add meaningful percentage points to GDP growth. Critics, including some within China, have questioned whether the financial returns justify the commitments made. The reality is that BRI is not a single coherent program. It is an umbrella label for a large number of bilateral deals, each negotiated separately, each with its own financial terms and political dynamics. The outcome has been uneven. Some BRI projects have delivered genuine improvements to logistics infrastructure. Others have stalled, been renegotiated, or become politically contentious. Understanding which is which requires looking at individual projects rather than treating BRI as a monolith. Let me take you through 3 port investments that illustrate the range of outcomes BRI has produced, because they're very different stories. The first is Piraeus in Greece. COSCO, China Ocean Shipping Company, China's state-owned shipping giant, acquired a 35-year concession on Piraeus Container Terminal in 2009 and then a majority stake in the Piraeus Port Authority in 2016. The commercial result has been genuinely impressive. Piraeus moved from being a minor European port to one of the fastest-growing container ports in Europe. Container throughput grew from under 1 million TEU when COSCO arrived to over 5 million. The port became a major transshipment hub for Chinese goods entering Europe via the Mediterranean, bypassing the congested northern ports. From a pure logistics standpoint, this is a BRI success story. The second is Hambantota in Sri Lanka. China provided financing to build a port in southern Sri Lanka, a project that critics of BRI cite most frequently as an example of debt trap diplomacy. Sri Lanka struggled to service the debt, and in 2017 agreed to hand China a 70-year operating lease on the port in exchange for debt relief. The debt trap framing is contested. The full story involves significant Sri Lankan government decisions that were not driven by China. But the commercial reality is that Hambantota handles very little traffic. It was built without a clear demand base, and the logistics case for its location has never been compelling. It is a port looking for a purpose. The third is Gwadar in Pakistan, as part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Gwadar is strategically significant. It sits at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, close to the Strait of Hormuz, and a road and pipeline corridor through Pakistan would give China land access to the Arabian Sea that bypasses the Strait of Malacca entirely. The vision is strategically coherent. The implementation has been slow, constrained by security challenges in Pakistan, infrastructure gaps, and the difficulty of attracting commercial traffic to a port that currently has very little behind it. The pattern across these three and many other BRI port investments is that strategic logic and commercial reality do not always align. Ports are not valuable because they exist. They are valuable when they attract traffic. Traffic requires hinterland connections, competitive tariffs, reliable services, and trust from the shipping lines and cargo owners who decide which ports to use. Inside the supply chain industry, BRI is assessed primarily through a commercial lens rather than a geopolitical one, at least at the operational level. The question practitioners ask is not, is BRI good or bad, but does using this port or this rail corridor make sense for my cargo, given the costs, the transit time, the reliability, and the documentation requirements? The answer varies enormously by trade lane. For cargo moving from inland China to Europe, BRI rail corridors, particularly the routes through Kazakhstan and Russia, now partially disrupted by sanctions, offered a genuine middle ground between expensive air freight and slow sea freight. Transit times of 15 to 18 days compared to 30-35 by sea at a fraction of air freight cost. For that specific corridor and cargo type, BRI rail was commercially compelling. For port infrastructure, the picture is more varied. Piraeus has changed routing patterns for goods entering southern and eastern Europe. Chinese-operated terminals in other regions are increasingly preferred by COSCO and its alliance partners, which changes the slot availability picture for other carriers. These are real commercial effects, not enormous but measurable and growing. The longer-term supply chain implication is about concentration of infrastructure ownership. If a significant portion of port infrastructure in developing regions is Chinese-owned and Chinese-operated, the routing choices available to non-Chinese carriers and cargo owners will, over time, be shaped by the preferences and pricing of those operators. That is not inherently sinister. It's how infrastructure ownership has always worked. But it is a structural shift worth understanding. If you want to track BRI's actual impact on global logistics, here is what to actually follow. First, Aid Data, a research lab at William and Mary University in the United States, maintains the most comprehensive public database of BRI project commitments, disbursements, and outcomes. Their reports are methodologically rigorous and distinguish clearly between committed funds and funds actually disbursed, which is important because the gap is often very large. Second, UNCTAD publishes annual maritime trade statistics that include port throughput data globally. When a BRI port's throughput starts growing significantly, it shows up here. When it stagnates, that shows up too. Comparing committed investment with actual traffic growth is the most honest way to assess which BRI ports are working commercially. And third, watch COSCO's fleet deployment and alliance arrangements. COSCO is the operational arm of China's maritime strategy, where COSCO deploys its largest vessels, which ports it designates as primary transshipment hubs, and which routes it prioritizes in its alliance schedules are the clearest signal of where Chinese port investments are generating real commercial traffic. The Belt and Road Initiative is neither the debt trap some critics claim, nor the development miracle its proponents advertise. It is a portfolio of infrastructure investments with varying commercial outcomes and a coherent, long-term strategic logic. The supply chain industry is living inside the consequences of that portfolio, whether it knows it or not. This is Supply Chain Daily, the structural forces shaping global trade explained from inside the industry. New video every Thursday and Saturday. Subscribe if this kind of analysis adds something to how you think about the world. And if you have direct experience working in BRI-connected ports or on BRI rail corridors, I would genuinely love to hear your perspective in the comments. Until next time.